Hi, this is Dave Anderson, and welcome to my channel, Helicool's Helipad, where great ideas take flight. Hey, today we're going to be building a welded together rim stove out of a couple of car rims. So this is a pretty cool project. Stay tuned. But I do have a really nice deep dish rim that I'm going to use for the very bottom. This way you can actually stack quite a bit of wood in there, and it'll burn for quite a long time. You don't have to keep feeding it because this is a very small space. But if you're heating just a pretty small area like a teepee or a small shop, but if you're just doing that, you know, you can't really put a whole lot of wood in here, and you have to keep feeding it, and you got to feed it with some pretty small stuff. So I'm hoping with this deeper dish I'll be able to put a little bit more wood into it, and it'll sustain the fire a little bit longer. Here's something that you have to do in order to prepare a rim. You need to make sure that all of the lead weights are off. This one doesn't happen to have any lead weights on it. Check both sides. Just pull the thing out, or you could cut it off and pull it out this way, but you are going to have a hole here, but I can easily weld this back up, so it's no big deal to have that. Now when you're building the very bottom here, you do have a choice. If you want, you can cut out a whole bunch of pieces like this and cover up each one of these holes in this rim and weld it in place. I've done that because I didn't have a whole lot of this left, but I do have this huge chunk here, and it's the very bottom, and what I could do is set this rim on top of this and scribe it out with a pen, and then cut this out with the angle grinder. Okay, now I still have the aluminum on the back. It's got 2 bolts on here. I know that some of you I can hear you in the background saying, get the sledgehammer, get the sledgehammer. That always works really well. You be quiet. I'm not using the sledgehammer right now. Oh, mackerel. I know. Get the sledgehammer. Oh my gosh, that's corroded pretty bad. So well, that's just gonna bend it up. So maybe I'll just try cutting that off without removing that back. All right, let's just see how well this fits. I think I'll even go with the dish side up instead of the other way. I really wanted this to fit down inside just a little bit further, so I had a bigger firebox. Okay, we're gonna try this second time. And it fits in here pretty good. Well, I know my brother's gonna have a fit seeing me do this because he doesn't like anything being welded down in it and being permanent. He used to. It burned through a little bit on that one. All right, so I'm also gonna take the time and weld up this hole where the valve stem was. Beautiful. Well, here's an important step you need to consider before you just go ahead and willy-nilly weld any rim to your other rim. Just dry stack it on there and then just try to lift it. If it's easy enough for you to lift now, that's good. Don't just put a massive rim on the bottom and put a massive rim on the top just because, well, I want a big one. Well, guess what? You're not going to be able to carry it. The rim is shot. What happened is this tire could actually take more pressure than this rim, and it cracked the rim inside here, and of course all the air went out of the tire. Tire got hot and blew up. Well, all right, now that the test fitting is done, the weld is going to come right across here, so this area on both rims is going to need to be cleaned up with a grinder so that the weld will have a nice place to stick to and won't have a whole bunch of paint and other contaminants that could affect the weld. Now, if you have some occlusions like this, it's not really that the weld isn't sticking, but if you want to clean that up with an additional weld bead, that's not a problem. This grinding will take you probably at least a half hour, and those tiny inclusions that you see, you can either grind those out, or you can just ignore it, or you can weld up those little inclusions. Basically speaking, they're not going to leak any smoke. This is the first rim stove that I have done that is not symmetrical. I have a large, very wide rim on the bottom and a significantly shorter rim on the top, but it really doesn't matter so long as you pick a line right in here that you're going to cut and then push the hinge in, weld the hinge in place, and then finish the cut. So my intention is to make a straight cut on this surface here, and it's very rounded, so you can't just put a ruler up to it and go, okay, that's where I want to make my cut. But what you can do is just take a scrap of paper. It's a little bit thicker. And go, okay, that's where I want to make my cut, and eyeball it pretty good so that this is straight up and down. Now I just put a line. This is going to help me make that cut with my angle grinder. And I can make that just a little bit longer, one way or the other. I don't want to exceed the thickness of that hinge. Once it goes in here, I need to be able to put this so that the barrel part of the hinge almost rests right on there. So I don't want to go any thicker or cut any further in where this is not going to reach. At least that's my plan. I don't want to do that. It probably won't make too much of a difference one way or the other, but that's my goal, is to make sure that this touches without making a cut clear into this metal here. Well, now that I have that welded on there, what I need to do then is now cut the door opening the rest of the way. This just ensures that the hinge is going to be perfectly fitted to the door. So you don't want to cut the door all the way until you get the hinge welded in. Now that the door opens up, you can weld a little bit more on the inside of this hinge. But I drilled holes in here. Didn't figure that I needed to show you drilling these holes, but drilled holes in it. And I'm just going to cut this strip out. But this is really where your imagination can run wild. You can do whatever you want to this part to create the airflow, and you don't have to follow this design, but this is a design that I like to do. And the rest of this is going to be a little bit more about artwork rather than technique. I prefer to have a very beefy looking door, and so I incorporate a few extra tricks that I use to make that happen, and I kind of like the look of the way I do it. But again, you can do it however you want to. The sky's the limit. So don't think that you have to follow my direction, but if you want to, that's cool too, because I rather like what I do. Now I drilled those holes so that I could make straight cuts with the angle grinder, and I've just made two, they're probably about 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch holes. Alright, so what I did is I just welded in some rebar. This is like 3/8 rebar. It's fairly small. I welded that onto the top and then cut it off and then welded a tiny little piece onto there. This is literally what I do to bend the rebar. I take my trusty sludge and I just put this in gravel. And as you can see, I can start bending it how I want to. and I just check it every once in a while to make sure that that's the correct bend. Whack it a couple other times, but this is a poor man's way of having a bending machine. So what I do is I keep whacking away and fine-tuning it. Fine-tuning it, that's hilarious. But I keep whacking away at it until I have the curvature that I want. Once I have the curvature that I want, I just weld that thing on there. Alright, now that she's welded on, I'm just going to cut this piece off right there, and then cut a very small piece, weld it into that spot, and then I'll be ready for the next step. Now that I have this built up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld a piece of this in here so that it has built-in breather holes, and you'll be able to see light come out of that when you have a fire going at nighttime. Alright, the very last thing you need to do with the door is just check form and fit, and if you need to pull the grinder out to grind off a couple of because it looks like the door isn't quite closing all the way, so there's probably a couple of welds that are a little bit high. Just grind those off so that the door fits nice and snug again. You can spend quite a lot of time on fit and finish, and I just say just do it until you think that it's good enough. But basically what you're looking for, and I'm not going to touch it, is right here where my fingernail is. You want to make sure that that is lined up. But anyway, I found another chunk of metal, and now I'm going to add my handle. So I'm going to show you a little bit different way of bending the metal, even though this has a little bend to it already. I'm going to show you a little bit different way. We're going to weld a piece on, smack it a little bit while it's still hot, bend it over, and then this last piece we're just going to kind of try to bend it back out. I designed this one so that it comes out pretty far away from the stove, have a chain hanging off of it so it doesn't get too hot. But it's a smaller piece. I bent it out. Like I said, just welded it on this curve, and then just curved it on out. But I'll show you another design. Alright, well this is just a little bit thicker metal, but I still did the chain thing. Just a little bit of a bend outwards, but welded it right up against the curve. This is pretty much what I want to do with this one. And then the catch, all that is a piece of welded steel, and it has a bump that I've ground out in both places so that you can keep it a little bit higher open to get it started. Once it's started, close up the stove just a little bit more. So as you can see, we welded all the way around, and it bent right over. Of course, when this is cherry hot, it bends rather readily. Now all I need to do is take this end and kind of give it a twist out just a little bit, and we'll be good to go. Well, all right, now that I went ahead and welded this, it's just a little piece of what was left of this, just welded it on here, and I put a little, ground out a little bit of a bite out of it here and here, so that you can leave it open just a little bit, or you can close it all the way. And then of course I welded on the chain. So that's pretty much it, unless you want to do feet for it. But just remember, every ounce that you add onto this just makes this thing just a little bit heavier. And this is already very heavy with 2 rims on there. So if you can make some feet that are very, very light or separate from the stove, you probably do a little bit better. Now here's an example of what I did on one of my stoves. I took pieces of a rim, and then I also had some rebar. That's some pretty heavy rebar because I didn't have lighter weight stuff. That actually added quite a bit of weight to it, and this rim stove, although it's really nice, it's very, very heavy. And this is also a different style. I wanted it to be able to roll around, so I added a couple of wheels and one peg that went all the way down. I originally had it just sitting on the pegs, but I decided to add the wheels after. And just lit this thing up because this is the brand new rim stove that I just finished, and I am what I call seasoning it. It's basically, I'm going to burn all of the paint off of it, and then I'm going to spray it with some spray PAM, or actually a knockoff, that doesn't matter. I do want to get this fire just as hot as it can possibly get. Then I'll take some of that spray PAM and it will burn that black or burn that white paint off, and the PAM will actually start to burn and patina the metal and turn it black. I do not recommend spray painting this black. Now that's what you want to see, some of that paint coming off of there. So that's looking pretty good. So once that paint is off of there, then you can start really getting a good patina. You can see there was no paint on the very bottom, but I sprayed a little bit of that PAM on there and it's already turned nice and black. I'm very happy that you were able to join me, and I hope you enjoyed this build. I hope that you have an opportunity to build a rim stove. It's really fun. It's really cool. There's not a whole lot of people that make them out there, and you show up with a rim stove to your next camp out, or your elk camp, or whatever you're going to use, even if it's just a patio heater. People are going to be talking about it. So my next video is going to be how to build a topper, but that'll be for next time. So until then, I appreciate you watching. Please make sure to like and make a comment, share or subscribe. Until next time, be safe and God bless.